So we're going to shift gears a little and talk about sort of the venture landscape. Lee, why don't you give us, for those unfamiliar with Cyrannus, give a sense of what you guys do and sort of the vision of the company.
Yeah, so we're media and fintech product for early stage venture, powered by the global human capital of the world. And what we try to do is we try to give access to people like the three panelists that were before me, an ability to score, price, and rate early stage startups.
So you say human capital, right? So humans still need to be in the loop. We just heard about the importance of humans. So talk about, when you talk about revolutionizing early stage investing, it sounds bold to do that. What's broken? What's the problem? Let's first look at what is the problem that you saw with early stage investing, and then how is Cyrannus thinking about addressing it?
Well, I think it services well for venture capitalists. I don't think it services their investors very well. And so what I'm seeing is broken is that there's just not a lot of predictability in early stage, even up to Series A and B. To me, it's more like that. I have a background in sports betting. It's more like you're placing a bet and then you're riding the power law. So the power law primarily long tail hold, but focusing on that short tail is vital and critical. How do we improve the outcomes? How do we impact society and invest in people that are overlooked, that don't have a Stanford degree, that are in the middle of the country? I think that's the big aspect.
When we first met, I was really intrigued when you started talking about an expert network, right? A group of humans that are really domain experts in a variety of ways, and allowing them to participate in evaluating early stage investments. Talk a little about sort of how you're applying AI to first then look at your network of humans to really evaluate some of these and give their feedback as you look at investments.
Well, if you have an AI venture firm that's trying to predict outcomes, I don't think you understand venture or AI. We have to have humans in the loop. One of the primary things is that technology is evolving so quickly. The industry is evolving so quickly. So if you have a fund one and you're doing great, by fund four, if you're applying the same thesis, you're probably going to lose. And so what we do is we make stakeholders out of all the brilliant people in the world. We give them chunks of equity that's liquid, because we're also a liquidity platform. We're a primary market for investors, and we're a secondary market for liquidity. And so we give them these chunks of equity to come onto the platform, and then we have an AI on top of that that makes it super efficient. So like I said, the three previous panelists, they're super busy. Our job is to make it very efficient, and very quick, entertaining, and engaging for them to basically make their bet in like a few minutes. And then we provide attribution back from that, from the market, to really filter out and understand who are the best of the best in the world. And the AI does that. It provides different weightings for different individuals at different aspects of the business. And then we filter that up. And we get to basically a score that basically says this is investment ready, or it should be bounded by these two prices when you do invest.
So many of us, know when we think about expert networks, we talked about things like GLG as a historic way that, as an expert in a certain area, I would get an email. It would say, hey, take a look at this, answer some questions. What you're doing is you're taking an early stage pitch, slicing it into very specific pieces, knowing then where to push it to an expert. And then almost, if you think about Reddit or things of voting up, voting down, and making it super relevant ultimately for the investment.
Right, so the stage one is you just submit an elevator pitch. It's like 30 to 60 seconds. It's a video feed. We have a media side where we're filtering the best news and the best advice of venture media, and then you have like a section for startup pitches, and you can scroll it like a TikTok, and it's like basically just a bunch of elevator pitches. And we pass the top 25% of those through. The founder gets tons of feedback from thousands of individuals about the state of their elevator pitch. The top 25% go through. From then we go into a more deeper due diligence of like 5 videos, a pitch deck, and we have a very structured data room that we can then push to these people. And we then pass the first 5% through. So we're a primary market. We have a bunch of angel investors on the platform. We're not a matchmaker, We actually have 125 million behind us that we're going to deploy to that top 5%. It's not a fund, but it's access to capital for the founder really quickly. Worst case scenario, they get this amazing feedback of all their blind spots. They can submit as many times as they want, refine their pitch, and if they're lucky, 1 in 20 are going to get funded in 2 to 4 weeks.
So when you think about your background, you talked a little about your background in gaming and sports betting, but you have a doctorate in physics. So talk a little about how your schooling, your education led you to this, and what maybe makes you, why did you see this as a problem that based on your education that you wanted to tackle?
Yeah, so I was doing my PhD, invented a camera, spun that out of Ohio State, and got out to the Bay Area for like a decade. I'd say like halfway through, I dealt with venture capital, so I got VC investment, and I just kind of saw their blind spots, the things that they wanted us to focus on, and that company ended up dying. And so in 2016, I was like, I'm really interested in AI. It seems to be the next big thing. I built an intelligent system, something similar to this, for sports betting. And then met my partner at a craps table in Vegas, and I was trying to sell this idea and invest and get investors for it. And he's like, well, I'm like, amazing. You don't need anybody else. Let's just start using the tool. And we've been doing that for about 8 years. And we've been taking the proceeds of that and running it back into venture. So we started 2 venture funds, Cobalt 1 and Cobalt 2. I moved back to Ohio, closer to my roots. The state of Ohio gave me $5 million to a free roll for the state, so we now have like a $10 million fund. But just looking at the way people were analyzing deals, the way that they were engaging GLG, the way that they were engaging other experts, I just saw sort of a blind spot, and I just think that for the future, the people that can raise the money for funds aren't necessarily the people that know what's going on in industry. And that's the big gap I see in venture capital. And then, I see VCs that, it's a lot of paper wealth, but imagine if you're a sports bettor and you don't know the outcome of a game for 10 to 15 years. How do you know you're good? How do you get better? You need to know now. And so we want to provide that market feedback. And then, I often say that VCs are the troglodytes of finance. I apologize if there's VCs in the crowd. But it's because if you just apply basic finance, this whole idea of investing and holding, waiting for that big parlay to hit to cover the other sins of your investments, that's fine, and you can do that. But if you just apply some basic finance techniques to the venture model by providing liquidity, reinvesting those compounded liquidity multiples over a 10-year period, you can be a 1 percentile fund with never having hit a unicorn. And where I'm at, which is in the middle of the country, the odds of hitting a unicorn are extremely small. And so how do we sort of leverage the fact that venture's incentivized to pump valuations at the middle stages, and how do we take that and provide it back to our investors and our partners so that they can compound that tendency over a 10-year period?
So, you talked about data. We've heard a lot about, the massive amounts of data that are being created. You wind up sitting on a lot of data, right? This unstructured video data that ultimately you're turning into actionable insights. I'm assuming there's another business when you start to think about, as you amass more pitches and more experts, there's a data business as well, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a data business, but I liked how the previous panelists were talking about the different structures. AI means a lot of different things to different people. There's core modeling, but then there's intelligent systems. And so there's going to be a lot of data generated at the lake level, but then how do we build that real knowledge graph data, that reasoning data in the next phase, when we start looking at the actions of all the people on the platform? Because there's sort of the active questions, right? There's the active understanding of an individual when they like a part of a presentation or they put their money behind it, which is a great signal. But then we have all the media on the other side that's interesting and engaging, and we're passively looking at the actions of those individuals on that side. And there's a wealth of information there that can then infer and inform the investment decisions.
So who wins, who loses, right? So we look at, the venture firms, the LPs, the people deploying capital, the startups. in this model where we can make smarter investment decisions about deploying capital, about placing our bets, who's ultimately the winner? Is the startup in the end, the early stage startup the winner? Is the asset allocator the winner?
I think the winner is the startups because they're not. A lot of founders are not going to be overlooked anymore. We're going to find alpha in really interesting places. I think the winners are going to be the accredited investors, the trillions of dollars of wealth for accredited investors that would never get into venture because they don't have transparency around what the deal really is, and they don't have liquidity. And so if we provide this product, and when we pull this off, there's a whole wealth of new capital that can infuse into Cyrannus. I view us as sort of like the 538 meets Robinhood, but I think that's going to open up a ton of new capital into venture, and that's really going to impact the country because I grew up super poor, farmer in Ohio, entrepreneurship saved my life. Getting involved in this, and I think that I want to provide that to other people like that, and I want to provide that to investors that may be in real estate or restaurants or whatever that are accredited, but trust the brand of Cyrannus, trust our collective wisdom, and then they can manage their investments, day to day.
You mentioned Robinhood, and you think about sort of investors. We've seen problems, right, with certain people not fully understanding the types of investments they've made. How do you see that sort of as the education component of, as you make venture more accessible to a new population, the role you also have to play on educating them on, there are going to be the winners and the losers. It's not a guarantee. How do you kind of step in and sort of help guide them through that process?
Well, you have sort of a media feed that we're filtering with the best content and the best creators in the world. So that's step one. But I think step two is encourage them to be in sort of a Cyrannus index fund, because there are going to be a lot of losers. But in an aggregate, we're going to invest in 1,200 deals in the next 3 years. But as an aggregate, the asset class can perform very well, and educating them on sort of recommending when they should take advantage of their liquidity and then reinvest and recompound that. I think the returns on that are going to be great.
So for the people here, obviously we have experts in the audience in a lot of different areas. We have some startups. What do they do? The platform is currently accepting expert applications, startup pitches. Talk about sort of, how people here can potentially get engaged.
Yeah, so first, the app's in the App Store, so please download it. If you're an expert, really we want you to be venture partners in Cyrannus. And you're going to make a great amount of equity and a lot of fun startups by taking place on the platform, and then we can connect you to founders, and then like sort of a venture studio model, you can make those social connections for the rest of your life and help guide those startups. And it's liquid equity, so it's not something that's like you have to, as an expert or advisor, you're waiting 10 to 15 years to take advantage of. I think that's for the experts. For the founders, we're never going to take money from founders, and you can submit as many times as you want. You start off with an elevator pitch. It's very video focused, but I think that the feedback that you're going to get, at a worst case scenario, it's going to bulletproof your idea and your opportunity before you ever do talk to another venture capitalist or another angel investor. You're going to know sort of the questions that you would get, the blind spots, the concerns, and really where to focus your message.
And historically, that was an investment banker, or you hired someone to do that. You may have been paying them. You're providing that as a free service to founders.
Yeah, it's free for founders, and it always will be.
So I know there was someone mentioned, I think it was Jim earlier, Tyson, Jake Paul, put on your sports betting sort of hat. We've seen a lot more betting happening, betting on the presidential election. When you look at the data, predictions on the presidential election, on that fight, have we seen people getting it right, from building these systems?
Yeah, well, I'm going to require all my founders to fight Jake Paul now for funding. But I think that markets are polls. Vegas doesn't Vegas has opening lines, but you can't really bet a lot of money on them. What they do is they're moving the lines as people make bets. When they put their decisions down with money, they're changing those lines to where they get to an optimization. But there's still tons of poll bias. Just recently in the election, there were tons of poll bias. But I think a few people that are really data focused and not very political were right. And so, we knew that there was about a 3% shift towards one way versus the other in the polls going into that election. It's because even deeply liquid markets have a deep bias in some situations, even in the meta-analysis. And so, we've made money, sports betting, and those are extremely liquid markets with very sharp lines. So we just want to bring that into venture.
Into venture. Well, so I encourage you all to download the app. Thank you, Lee, for joining us. Thank you for your support. We are going to break for lunch now. Lunch is going to be served on the 3rd floor. There's going to be 3 breakout sessions over lunch. There'll be one on the AI and finance, one on healthcare, and one on sustainability. So the rooms upstairs you'll be able to find. So please join us upstairs, do the HTC Vive demo, which is all data visualization and interaction, and we'll see you upstairs. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me.